Each year, Microsoft Research hosts hundreds of influential speakers from around the world, including leading scientists, renowned experts in technology, book authors, and leading academics, and makes videos of these lectures freely available.
So we are thrilled to have Roz Picard here from MIT. She is the co-director of the Things That Think part of the Media Lab. There are a few different segments of the Media Lab, so she's the co-director of the Things That Think part of the Media Lab. I guess you're the head of effective computing, which is a field which she started and in which she is the most well-known person, although she has wonderful students, I see, one of whom is here, who are also in that field. So we are going to hear about emotion technology from autism to customer experience and decision-making.
Thanks, Jennifer. I got to turn this on. Okay, thanks. It's a pleasure to be here. I guess this doesn't amplify for this room, right? This just goes for the recording.
This is taping it, yeah.
All right. So you guys are being taped too, I guess, your questions. But I welcome you interacting and asking questions as we go. And I don't know what you're looking at over there. I think it's the same thing.
It's
hopefully.
The same thing,
It's a block. It's like what they put in front of the motion detector in my office so that it turns the lights off when I come in and vice versa. So anyhow, it's a pleasure to be here, and I also want to invite all of you over to the Media Lab because you may or may not know this, but Microsoft is a sponsor of the Media Lab at the level of a consortium, which means that you have royalty-free access to everything we do. So if you see or hear of anything over there that interests you, you are entitled to come and get it, basically. So this is a tiny taste, a few of several hundred projects that are going on over there, and you guys are invited to our open houses and stuff. So let's try to encourage you to come on over and learn more. Hyungil Ahn is here. This is Hyungil right here. And I'll talk a little bit about some of his work at the end. Otherwise, I'm talking about things that the group has contributed to here. So first of all, how do you measure if someone's excited or calm? Do you guys, has anybody here tried to do this before?
Blood pressure?
Blood pressure, yeah. High blood pressure, yeah. Sorry, Christian, what are you saying?
He said you compare them to Jennifer.
Compare them to Jennifer. Uh-oh. That's tough when it's coming from your spouse, right? Okay. So other things?
It's like your own internal state. You can tell whether you're calm or excited.
Some people can. Some people actually can't until they've basically snapped. It's like a lot of people have the sigmoid function of slowly changing state, and they're aware of it the whole time. Other people seem to have this range where they change, and they're not aware of it till they hit the ends, wham, and pitch, yep, pitch goes up with excitement. Loudness goes up. Right?
Yeah, someone said pulse, yeah.
Pulse, yep, pulse rate can go up.
Pulse rate and resistance of your skin.
Yeah, heart rate goes up and conductance of the skin, actually, whenever resistance goes up. Resistance goes down. So we, actually.
Oh,
Yes, it is. In fact, at the recent lie detection meeting in Washington, they said the number one signal still, out of all the progress that's been made over the last several decades, is the electrodermal activity. That's the change in conductance or resistance of your skin. You can measure either one. Usually people measure the conductance because it intuitively goes up as the arousal goes up, autonomic arousal goes up. So the best thing we know of right now to measure this arousal dimension is conductance. It's traditionally measured from the fingertips of the palm. You can also measure from here. You can measure a lot of other places, usually with sticky electrodes, wires, in a box. This is an image taken from a usability lab where they're testing a new game. You know, maybe they're testing Natal, and Natal is supposed to be exciting, right? Okay, and so you succeed if you excite your players. The excitement, the arousal, is also related to memory and attention. So educators, advertisers, people are very interested in understanding what makes this signal change because you're more likely to have an experience that's memorable with that.
This is a really stupid question, but is the sympathetic nervous system the same as what people call the parasympathetic?
I have a slide for you here.
Okay.
The next one. So the autonomic nervous system, most people think of it as having two branches, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. If you're a geek and you dig back in the original literature, it also has the endocrine, the branch that has to do with your digestion and so forth, which now is getting more attention because they recognize there's basically another brain in your gut, 100 million neurons down here that shows REM-like behavior while you sleep. All kinds of cool learning and stuff can happen in the gut brain too. But anyhow, most people ignore that branch and they just talk about the two that Jennifer asked about, the sympathetic and the parasympathetic. And every organ of your body is, and they're not all shown here, but they're all innervated by both, with one exception, according to the people, the physiologists, and who knows, this could change, but right now they say that the skin is the one organ that's purely innervated by the sympathetic branch. So sympathetic here is very tightly written as fight or flight. The other is rest and digest. That's a major oversimplification, but basically when you talk about your heart rate going up, your pitch going up, the arousal going up, that's the sympathetic response. But it also could be, another way of thinking about these is this is like the accelerator in your car and this is like the brake. Okay, so the vagal brake, the parasympathetic, when the parasympathetic is on, it's putting on the brake, it's calming down. But one could also say that you're getting revved up because the foot is being left off the brake. If you're in a steady state of being revved, which some of the physiologists think we are, because we need to be ready to move fast, you can accelerate a car faster if it's already pre-revved and you're just letting your foot off the brake than if you have to go from 0 to 100, right? So it's very interesting to look at the different measures of these together because they can both make your heart go up or both make it go down. But the skin is the only one where this is decoupled. So when we measure changes in the heart, it's a mixture of these two, and we do frequency analysis, separate out different bands, and try to associate them with the different components. But the skin, we get pretty much the pure sympathetic response.
So does it mean if I actually manage to override things on the left with my right, that my so that my skin is still wet?
Yeah, it could be. Your skin could still be wet, like from from perspiration or rain or various other causes, or just
Sort of, I mean,
yeah,
He's
yeah.
saying
So
that
more
you,
conduct.
more,
right,
yeah.
right. So you'll pick up the conductance when the skin is wet. You'll also pick up just when the pores fill with this response and the skin doesn't even feel wet yet. The electrical measurement will change. It's very sensitive.
But my question is, so do I, because if I can't measure the brake,
Mm-hmm.
some people think that we are always excited there and we just have to brake more or less.
Yep.
Then my skin might show that I'm excited, but actually, according to the theory, that I'm always excited and I'm only not excited if I brake. I'm not excited because I'm calmly braking.
I think you lost me. If I record that, those are the snippets we record for our corrugator experiments where we're trying to measure confusion. Yeah.
But I don't understand his question.
I think you're trying to paraphrase.
The gap matter or also the absolute value. I think this is what they ask. I mean, that's only the gap between the break and
Yeah.
the gap matters or only the absolute value.
The gap method.
So essentially saying
Looking
that-
at changes. Yeah.
Well, the question is saying, what if let's say I'm in a fight or flight mode, but actually my parasympathetic division is putting on the brake.
Right.
So I'm actually pretty relaxed because I'm pressing the
Right,
brake.
right. You've
pretty hard.
decreased your heart rate.
Right. But
Yeah.
still,
Your skin conductance is still high here.
exactly.
So other organs may be.
Exactly. So if you measure my skin
Right.
conductance, it seems like I'm very aroused and very upset or very excited, but actually I'm very relaxed because I'm pressing the brake.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
the measurement is
Well,
not very-
it's a little more, you can't think of relax as just this one-dimensional thing, I guess is what we have to say.
Yeah.
There are many components that are affected differentially by this, and depending on which one you measure, you're going to see more what looks like relaxation or more what looks like stimulation.
So are they both involuntary?
Interesting. So the autonomic nervous system, just like with the trend in autonomic computing, the presumption is that they're involuntary. However, if you talk with people who've really dug into this, they'll tell you there are cases where you can learn to voluntarily control these. However, those cases usually require some work on your part. So it's and maybe you can entrain yourself to do that work in a more cognitive behavioral therapy way, right? So somebody with panic attacks where they have this involuntary sympathetic fight or flight response, the Holy Grail, right, is to teach them to have a similar involuntary response that helps calm them back down quickly so they don't
So is the
get in trouble.
autonomic part of the parasympathetic, or is it different from?
So the autonomic is the name for, that includes these two branches.
Oh, that includes both?
Yeah, as well as the
Okay.
neuroendocrine.
Okay, I really
So
know
I
nothing.
can train myself to actually get the conductance up too.
You can train yourself, and I could teach you ways to fool lie detector tests if you want. We could talk about this over dinner. Yeah. In fact, I got in trouble for putting that in a document. This German researcher said, "You're not." He's the expert. He wrote the book this thick on the signal, and I sent him my stuff. Can you please make sure that I'm not getting anything wrong here? And he said everything's right, except that you're not allowed to tell people how to fool lie detector tests. I'm like, too late. I already sent that part to everybody I know. Okay. Yeah.
Why does your skin conductance change? Is this just sort of a corollary of some other process, or is there some value? It puzzles me because, inhibiting digestion, I can understand why this is a very valuable thing for your body to be doing, but changing skin conductance puzzles me.
Yeah, I know. It is puzzling. I honestly don't have a good answer for that.
Is it to cool you off? Is it that sweating cools you off?
This is not the thermoregulation part of the system.
It's not
Yeah.
thermoregulation.
I'm
Are you sharing one question?
Yeah, I'm starting to compute what parts I'm going to skip and compress.
So we should let you get back. And
okay.
you can tell us you've had enough of our questions.
I will move on. This is sort of the obligatory, why there's companies in the Boston area that are interested in this signal, because it's useful for memory and attention, right? This is electrodermal activity, skin conductance measurement here. When it goes high, this is a single subject who happened to actually want to watch the Patriots play in the Super Bowl at MIT. Other people, we were trying to convince them they should come watch the Super Bowl. This only happens at MIT. I think we have to pay people to watch the Super Bowl. And this guy has his peak response during this Patriots touchdown. You also see a lot of anticipatory arousal build up here. There's a nice relaxing decay after this, like, my team is, doing what I want. There's a peak here during a Doritos Mouse TV commercial. There's a peak during a first down. There's also a peak during an end zone overthrow. I include the positive and the negative to emphasize that this vertical dimension of the emotion space does not differentiate positive and negative. It's generalized arousal. While it's called fight or flight, it can go up with positive, exciting anticipation too. When we see big name, exciting speakers show up in front of our audience and we're measuring our audience's sympathetic arousal, we see it go up when they're excited about something positive. So we see it go up with this positive touchdown. We see it go up also with we have other people we can look at. We have a woman who showed absolutely no response during any of the football events, completely uninterested in football, peaked during all the TV commercials, and peaked during one point where all the men in the room were yelling and screaming at a call the referee made. When all the guys were yelling, she peaked. So it's interesting to look at what, later, like what's most memorable for people. We haven't done those studies at MIT. They're in the literature, and they say that this is the best known physiological measure for getting that high correlation with what people remember later.
Also, the more excited you are, the more you remember. Right?
Yeah. And like all the work on flashbulb memories and so, these big now the accuracy of your memory is another issue. Okay, I remember where I was and the carpet was green. Well, maybe the carpet was blue, but you got where you were, kind of thing.
There was just a study that I saw written up about Xbox Live and how people get more aroused and they tend to notice or to be able to recall the ads in Xbox Live more than on TV. I mean, it was in CNN
totally.
today.
Oh, wow, nice. So that's completely consistent with us.
So it's this kind of thing.
Right. So charge more for the Xbox Live ads than major network television.
So that would be one of the uses of this.
It's really true. I know mine, a lot of us just go down in front of TV. It's very low arousal, but games are extremely arousing. Yeah, it takes a while to calm down the kids before bedtime if they're playing games, but not if they've been watching TV. So we've become very interested in working with a lot of people on the autism spectrum. I don't know if any of you are on the spectrum or have friends or family. Is anybody who are
No, we are nowhere. We've never met someone with Asperger's. We have no idea what you're talking about.
I know Microsoft's very friendly to people on the spectrum. And so this is a blog I highly recommend by one of many friends we've made on the autism spectrum. Amanda's a non-speaking autistic person, but she's extremely smart, types 120 words a minute. When we're online, and I'll usually talk and she'll usually type, and we're perfectly matched except for when we lose the audio channel. And then it's very clear that one of us is handicapped, and it's not Amanda. Okay, I'm a pretty fast typist, but I can't keep up with her. She's like, "Are you there?" "Yes, I'm still trying to figure out how to word my response." So we took her a whole bunch of our technology that we're developing. I'll show you a couple examples of things here for people on the autism spectrum to kind of get early user feedback, right? Like, is this interest? So we were with her all day up in Vermont. We drove back. We were kind of tired. She still has energy. She's still going strong. She blogs about our visit that night and about some of the sensors that we brought. So laughing makes your electrodermal activity go up. This in particular, she was blogging about our skin conductance sensor. Being scared or stressed out makes it glow brighter. This was mapping it to an LED. She goes on and she says, there were so many people in the room. My arousal level was really high, it turned out. And in fact, it was about 6-7 times what I was used to seeing in the lab with people around MIT, although mine was also really high at the time too. And we were in kind of a warm room. But if I sat and rocked and didn't look at the people, it slowly went down. This was really interesting. So she's sitting kind of out of eye contact range because that's stressful for her, kind of back behind us on the sofa. And I turn to her and I say, Amanda, would you try rocking? Okay, because I knew from her videos that she flapped and rocked and did all these classic autistic repetitive movements, but she hadn't done any of them while we were there, as if she was controlling herself. So she starts rocking on the sofa. We have video of Bill Gates rocking. You've probably seen this too. It's very popular out in the community. And her signal went down like a slide on a playground. It was this amazing decay, beautiful decrease. That touchdown was nothing compared. It was just this beautiful decay. Very interesting, right? And she was like, wow. And then the moment one of us I didn't actually notice this, she noticed this part, turned the head to look at her, though, it suddenly jumped up again. And this was before the point of eye contact even, and certainly before I could feel more than a small difference in my stress levels. So back to this awareness of it, right? You may not feel it, but this could be a sensitive measure that could show you some things in your life that are changing it, that maybe on hindsight you can learn to attend to and see if that is confirmed by your experience, right? But a lot of these passed unnoticed. So she wished she could have this she wrote later, wished she could have this to show a lot of people who are invested in forcing eye contact on autistic people, right? Because they say, all right, I'm going to get you in the classroom, I'm going to look in your face, and I'm going to teach you something, you're going to pay attention. Meanwhile, their fight or flight sympathetic response, not for everybody, but for some people, is so through the roof that they enter a state of autonomic shutdown. You shut out information, you do not take in anything, and it's completely counterproductive to learning. So if you could read this out for people. Yeah. Yeah, exactly. It was the anticipatory, which is interesting because, in fear-conditioned learning, right, you would learn, the shock that precedes the pain, right, or the head turning that precedes the fight or flight response. So one could say these are learned protective mechanisms, right, if this causes your heart to overrev. In fact, Matthew Goodwin, who we collaborate with, has been measuring kids in classrooms on the autism spectrum whose heart rates might be, while they're looking as calm as you, might be, and yours are all probably like 60 to 90 or something right now. Theirs would be 120, 140, 160, sitting there looking calm, okay, autonomic,
These are
panic.
kids with autism, or
Kids on the autism spectrum, Asperger's, autism, PDD, NOS, yeah.
But we all like that, right? If you
No, honey, we all have Asperger's
no,
here,
but
not
in
in
the
the
sense
world.
of anticipatory, right? If you sort of put me in a situation where I think you're killing me, it's torture, even though you don't touch me.
Sure.
Yeah.
Or even like, I remember in middle school or primary school, right, when I'm giving an exam, if I believe the teacher is watching me, I won't be able to do it. I know I can solve this, right? But if I believe, I don't even have to know that she's actually watching me.
Right.
I just have to believe that she's watching me, right?
Yeah. Right. Exactly. So some of us work best when we know we're not going to be disturbed or interrupted. Some of us work best with lots of social interaction, and people have kind of different set points, right? So what we have now is a tool that lets us instead of that being a hidden variable in our studies, right, and you get different outcomes and you haven't any idea why it worked for this part of the group and not for this part, now we have an observable variable that we can go back and start to relate to some of these outcomes. And that's of value for a lot of the problems that we've been looking at over many years. Here's just another quick example of data, noisy data. Kids are wearing the sensor off the wrist in classroom in Birmingham. We're working with low SES kids who have the $100 laptops, $200 laptops. Here, $400 laptops, 100-pound laptops. So So here, let's see, we have a kid we had a kid on the maroon line, a purple line, a green line, a yellow line, a blue line here. Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 kids. The blue kid is really calm compared to his classmates here. This segment of, this is time. This segment of, here the kids are putting them on, there's a lot of noise and all. Here the kids are told fidget time, okay, you can crawl on the desk, you can jump up and down, do whatever you want, go wild, be crazy. And these kids are all being wild and crazy. I don't know what's going on with this kid. He's just like out in his own little space for a little while here, and then he gets excited toward the end. Then they watch an inattentional blindness video. I don't know how many of you have seen this video, where these people count how many basketball passes the people are making. How many of you saw the gorilla walk across? Not many people, right, because they're counting the passes, but this big gorilla just walked through them. The kids think this is interesting. This blue guy really gets excited and comes on board. This maroon person's kind of relaxing at the beginning of the video, and then gets really interested right here where they're learning about the gorilla. And actually, I think this is where the blue kid points out the gorilla. He wasn't paying attention to the passing and got excited about the gorilla here. Then we tell everybody to do jumping jacks. And this troubled me when I saw this data, because I said to my student, this is very reliable. Physical activity, sweating, right? Everybody should be high. This should be a max operator, right, when we're calibrating the scale. What happened to this guy right here? I said to my student, darn, this is supposed to work. He's supposed to be high. She said he did 1 jumping jack and quit. Perfect. That looks exactly like what happened. So then everybody's supposed to relax, and indeed you see everybody relaxing except this green person, and this straight line is actually wireless data dropout. So I can't honestly say what happened here. That looks like an artifact. Pretty much everybody else does, except this yellow person. Some people have difficulty relaxing. This is just a piece of noise right here. So that's interesting too. So what we can see now is you can collect data for a classroom. You can look at individuals separately. You can look at groups. You can separate boys and girls. You can separate, Mac users from PC users. You can separate.
Do you see big gender differences or not so much?
Not so much, surprisingly. Yeah, there are believed to be big extroversion, introversion differences, but not gender. Pardon?
Are there people who walk lockstep?
Yes, that's very interesting. Actually, Carl Marcy at MGH has looked into that. So if 2 people are in sync, if they're empathizing, you will tend to, his hypothesis is you will tend to see them peak at the same things. And he has measured that in some patient-therapist interactions.
Does they have to be in the same room, or can you do it when they don't see each other?
Can you do it over a distance?
Or don't smell each other or something. Could it be like pheromones?
Oh, that's interesting. We haven't tested it over a distance. We've done chat rooms where people's fonts took on a visualization characteristic based on the arousal on email with it, but we haven't looked at synchrony over distance. We could, that's interesting.
Because
yeah,
some
like for
people
brainstorming.
Yeah, some people say that we may actually have pheromones that, we understand more about, like the insect's pheromones than we understand about our own pheromones, so that would be, could those put you in synchrony?
My hunch is that the synchrony would not be so much a olfactory communication, but would be more likely to be that you're both experiencing a similar event and you're having a similar or strong or weak response to it, and that would be more related to that.
But if I saw somebody who was upset, that would, and I was
and if you care about them, it'll go up.
Them,
exactly. And we see that actually in 428, if I show an example of from our Sensory Processing Disorder Foundation, where kids are so we'll see, actually I don't really, let's hear, but here the child is wearing what I'm wearing on my wrist, she's wearing on her ankle, and so is the therapist. And we have data of the therapist and the child together, and we can see when they're changing together and when they're changing differently. Actually, the data in this particular example I pulled up is from the child's left and right leg, and the 2 sides of your body are usually synchronized. Occasionally, one side of your body is different from the other side, and we originally thought that was just due to noise, so we were just averaging the 2. Then we learned that the 2 hemispheres of your brain, while you have one heart and they both contribute to that one heart, they contribute ipsilaterally to the 2 sides of your body, your electrodermal activity. So it's possible one hemisphere is highly activated and the other one is deactivated, and you would actually see this difference, which is really interesting. It's specifically interesting in cases where there are sensory differences or brain abnormalities or depression. We think it's quite interesting. There's some asymmetries that have been, there have been some number of studies, brain imaging showing that. But anyhow, we can see things here. This girl got increasingly aroused toward the beginning here. She started getting kind of upset. Right here, she climbed in the ball pit. lots of physical pressure on her body. This is comforting for some people. It's irritating for others. For this child, it was comforting, and her level went down here. She gets out of it, it goes up. She gets back in it, it goes down. She gets on a swing, it's stressful. She starts swinging, and she calms down. So we can watch for an individual child with her sensory issues how her levels change as she goes through therapy.
Whenever it's up, you say it's stressful.
Ah.
You told us before that.
Good point. Thank you for catching me on that. You don't know just because it's up that it's stressful. So, in fact, you have to look at other things. And here we happen to know this because she also gets very kind of, whoops, she starts complaining. Also, actually here, let's go over to the swing. This interface could use some ability to click right on the signal and not down here. So here she wants to get on, she knows her routine is to get on the swing. She gets a little stressed about this. You'll hear her a little bit there. See? So there's this a little bit of fear. Yeah, this sounds like agitation. This is a girl with autism who's non-speaking. She gets on here. The therapists believe that her proprioceptive abilities might benefit from this movement, but they've never had any objective variables they could observe for this, right? So now she starts swinging along that axis, and we see by this variable this nice decay. Okay, and this will just continue. So you can imagine looking at this in other situations in your life where it might go up or down, positive or negative, and you do need additional information to get that key bit. Yeah, thank you for reminding me to not overinterpret that.
So, some people, my son really can only, if he wants to relax, he has to do sports or things like that. So, but I wonder whether it could be relaxing for people even doing the sport. Or it's just, but this curve still could go up, or how does it work?
Oh, well, if you're doing a sport and you're increasing your perspiration, it's going to go up just from that. So
even though maybe it gets your head into really, when people do run or so, they say they get into this, or
zone, right?
They swim a lot, right?
Yeah.
They love this calm, they say everything calms down in them, even though probably the heart rate and all this goes up.
That's right. So there are multiple factors. Actually, if you do the spectral analysis of the heart, you'll see these different frequency bands, and you'll see that it interacts a lot with your breathing. So if you're doing an exercise or sport where you're breathing at a particular frequency, that will actually activate a different region of the frequency spectrum of your heart related to the baroreflex, the blood pressure regulation. And if you breathe at that frequency, whether or not you're doing a sport, you can actually change the way that your heart rate variability is distributed, and that is usually associated with that sense of well-being and calm when you have a peak in that part of your heart rate, which is usually around like 5 to 6 breaths a minute for various people. Now for exercise it's probably higher, and there, what is it, is enhanced oxygen. There are a whole lot of things going on that are contributing to that beneficial feeling afterwards, if you feel beneficial. Some people just feel great when it stops. There's the endorphins, absolutely, right, if you really push and get the endorphins
about
up.
Something like somebody who does a long run or who swims for
But
an
there's
hour
endorphins.
That's right.
Doing
That's
that.
right. There's also people who hate it and love when it stops, and the pain stops, right? It feels so good when you stop hurting. So there are a lot of factors there. It's not just this, right, I guess is what I want to say. So back to the ipsilateral, since we have the ability to measure this on the left and right side and get the same or different things, we noticed on one of our Europ's little brothers that one side was much higher than the other before some seizures. This poor kid's falling over like 4 times a day with seizures, and he just happened to collect this differential interesting pattern. So this led to a study at Boston Children's Hospital where we've collected data from over 90 people, 90 kids there who are in for neurosurgery, for implants, vagal stimulators to stimulate that brake, to put the brake on at various times. Not everybody has a pattern like this, but this was a particularly interesting one. This is work my student Ming-Zer Po and a team of Europe's been collecting with us. So the levels I was showing you of that girl were down around like 2 or 3. This is up above 25. Okay, and these are These red lines are where the doctors annotated seizures with the EEG, the definition of the attack. And we're seeing these long sustained, enormously high autonomic patterns. We think these are related to what a lot of people report when they say, I felt this aura or this funny thing, you know. And these, the EEG activity precedes the clinical signs of this. So one might not actually see the person having the seizure just yet here, right? It may take a little while before people see it. So we're looking more closely at when these occur, what kinds of seizures these occur for, and so forth. Mind you, most of this kid's other data is down here, kind of noise on this scale. This is sleep. Turns out that sleep has very interesting patterns with this. We weren't expecting this. From my classroom measurement of this, we noticed that when people went to sleep, their EDA went really low, right? Okay, in fact, we've noticed in general, sorry, Microsoft with PowerPoint, but whenever there's a new speaker, it goes up. When there's live demonstration, it goes up. When there's laughter, live interaction, it goes up. Every time there's PowerPoint, there's this decaying exponential. Okay, I'm sure it's not just PowerPoint. It's probably Keynote also. Yeah. So what I expected, yeah. So see how low these are. Okay, these are falling asleep. Okay, and this is what we see in the classroom. What astonished me was these peaks when you're sound asleep. What the heck are these? I thought maybe it was thermoregulation REM, you know, the sweating response or something. Yeah. So I borrow Bob Stickgold's REM detector over at MGH. This is a little band you stick on your head, and you attach a little piezo sticky thing to your eyelid. It has a little wire, goes up there, a little motion detector, attaches to a nice little portable unit that you stick under your pillow, and sweet dreams, right? Go to sleep with this, and you're supposed to mash this button every time you wake up, so that in the morning you have a recording of your rapid eye movement, your motion, and your button mashes. So I get up and I look at this, and I have 17 button mashes. And the reason is because every time you roll over, this thing like tries to keep your eyelid going that way, and it's a little uncomfortable. But anyhow, after many failed attempts and finally some successful ones, we learned it was not REM. And we're still digging into this. We're doing a bunch more controlled studies with this right now. But it looks like this is related to slow wave sleep. And that's actually extremely interesting for memory formation.
Slow wave?
Slow wave sleep, deep sleep. So this is really interesting. So work is continuing on this.
They say sometimes in that slow wave sleep you're processing.
Well, think about the relation between arousal and memory and attention, memory formation. Okay, and those if you've built computer learning algorithms, you know that try to figure out what data to keep and what to throw away, and when to store and reinforce and connect up certain memories and tag and touch those in some way versus to garbage collect, get rid of them. You've got to have some tags of significance and importance associated with things, and we think the arousal, the sympathetic nervous system response, is possibly one such tag. I wouldn't say it's the only tag, but I would say it's a significance tag. Things that matter to you make this go up. So if you're going to go through and
In order to store the memory correctly, you have to emulate the same reaction that generated.
I have to be careful what I mean by correctly, but in order to say this one
Accurate.
matters enough to keep around, okay, I would think touching on the system. This might be completely wrong, I don't know, but nobody knows right now. But it's interesting that we're finding this during this stage. And there's a whole lot more interesting stuff I could say about this that makes me want to talk more about, but I'm going to move on. And we could ask about it later. So we can talk about some other things too. So we are, with our sensors, not just trying to do a lot of cool health applications. We have a radical different idea, right? We all know the healthcare system's going to crash, right? Because it's costing more and more, and doctors can't keep up with all the data they're getting. And increasingly, where do we all go when we want to know something? We don't go to the doctor, we go to the web, right? And we ask, we type in, I woke up with blurry vision, and we start reading about everybody else who woke up with blurry vision and what happened to them and decide whether or not we need to go to the doctor. So what we're finding is it would be kind of cool, you get your data and you want to know, like, am I normal? Is something wrong with me? Am I like these people? You read the paper. Those of you who do scientific studies, probably a bunch of you know that when you get a significant statistical effect, you can publish your paper, but we go back and read those papers, and the results almost never held for every member of the group, right? They held for a significant number, but they never held for everybody. So if you're a participant in these studies, you know that maybe you find out they published the results, maybe you find out that for your group of participants there was result X, but you don't know if it actually pertains to you because you're not allowed to see your data, it's all anonymized and so forth. So we think today it should be different. Participants should be allowed to upload their data or not, right? Participate or not. You should be able to see your data relative to everybody else's. Theirs is anonymized. You know which point you are. You can see if you're in the cluster the big cluster that has that statistically significant finding, or if you're one of the outliers, or if your data didn't record properly, right? And then you can benefit as an individual, science for the people, by the people, right? Not just this power to the scientists and the doctors to say, you have this label, therefore here's the drug for you, that kind of silliness, right? When in fact, what the medical profession really does is they say, here's a list of 24 drugs. These people are paying us the most. We'll put those at the top of the list. You have this sleep problem or this other condition. We'll just start at the top of the list and work our way down until we find something that works for you. Okay, it's a very expensive, ineffective, and even dangerous way to do the science and medicine these days. So we're going to try to change that with a lot of our development of these technologies. I've been speaking to medical communities about some of this lately. So I'm now required to do full disclosure, which is that we actually had a bunch of requests for these. So we actually have spun out a company so that I no longer have to solder these on my desktop at night and have my students making them for our collaborators on weekends. So there's now a commercial enterprise to make these sensors. And we're not making these at MIT anymore. All right, so back to this, the limitations of this, right? It only gets this vertical dimension. We want to understand a lot more about this space, and then we want to do a whole lot more with this information. So here I'm going to talk about some of the work of Dr. Rana El-Kalyoubi, who has developed technology to read a lot of other interesting affective cognitive information from faces. And the face, if you want to know where to get the positive negative information, the best place right now is the face. All right, it's not perfect. Talk about a lot of the flaws. Attractive, repulsive, moving toward and away, things like that are also good. So we can measure more than the face, but let's look at the face for a moment. And here we started by training our system. Getting data is hard. Getting labeled data is a real pain. Simon Baron-Cohen at the Autism Research Center at the other Cambridge, where you guys also have a great lab out there too, has collected lots of videos of actors expressing not just these states in white, but many other. Here's a taxonomy of 6 states in green that breaks down into these words. He's actually got a taxonomy of 24, a lot of other things here. So what Rana has done is we're using ordinary video input. We can do it from laptop webcams and other tiny little cameras and phones and wearables and glasses and so forth. Do work with tracking. I know Microsoft does a lot of computer vision and machine learning stuff. You guys know about all these different methods. And put it all together, we use dynamic Bayes nets to infer the underlying state that has the highest likelihood for giving rise to these labels. Let's see if we could just switch to a live demonstration here. See if this will work. There we go. Okay, so I'm being tracked here. If somebody else wants to come up and try this, I'll take a volunteer. Yeah, somebody want to come up and make faces? So you'll, whoops, I want to turn off the audio right now. All right, so the tracker, actually we didn't write this tracker. This is a tracker that Google bought from Nevin Vision and has given us permission to use. So if I nod my head, we now see that using the tracker output in Rana software, we detect things like head nods, head shakes, head tilt, head turns. My head is forward right now. Depending where I am, I can calibrate it for usual desk usage or kiosk usage or learning environment usage or television watching usage or whatever you want. And down here, it's showing you the probability as a function of time of the 6 states that I showed you in that hierarchy before. Okay, so when I'm sitting here kind of holding still and staring at it like I'm just trying to figure out what's happening on my computer, blue is high. Blue here is concentrating. If I'm like, hey, this is really cool. So then purple went up and green went up. Purple is agreeing because I was nodding and smiling. Interest is green here. I guess I raised my brows. In fact, as I'm talking about it, I did it again. Recalling.
Yes, she agreed with herself.
Pardon? There I am confused. Okay, so here's yellow. That just went up. And orange went up. You got thinking to go high.
To everyone. I'll
Okay. So you're getting me to smile again. So agreeing is going up. All right.
These are obviously very culturally trained.
Yes, exactly. And yeah, and they are. And so obviously this is an outward set of observations of behaviors that are being mapped to these labels. I could fake all of these too, right? It doesn't necessarily tell you what I'm truly feeling. And so another extremely important part of our work is not just about the measurement technology, but about learning how to craft situations where if you want people to feel comfortable showing their true feelings, how do you, help them do that? Because we're very, I'm very opposed to taking people's emotions without their knowing or wanting, and very in favor of enabling people to have more control over and understanding of an ability to communicate what they want to communicate. So we are very careful about trying to put in modes that are understandable for how you can control them, right? So if we already have a mechanism for fooling people with our face, I want to preserve that, all right? And so that opens a whole bunch of cans of worms, but we'll come back to that later if you want. Here are different ways of playing with displays to show this information. So we developed this for people who are trying to learn this, and learning it in real time is hard. So this is, as you've probably figured out, just a max operator over this, shown radially, updating. So we can just see the orange is highest, this thinking state, while I'm trying to think about what I should be covering in my skipping around time here. And here is a traffic light. We had several people on the autism spectrum say, could you just tell me how to regulate the conversation? Okay, so I'm talking with this girl, and I kind of like her, and then all of a sudden she leaves. Like, I just was telling her about my fishbowl collection or something, and I don't understand why she left. And he didn't see that she was stopping looking interested when he went on for 25 minutes about this. So could he have some feedback, right? And in all sincerity, I mean, if you're interested in fishbowls, this is fascinating, right? And I wouldn't, so some people accuse these folks of being boring, which is not true, right? They're actually quite interesting. It's just that it's hard to read the cues. And so they sometimes need explicit information. So this system, we think, over time, as it improves, could give people explicit information. Green light, you look interested. You're looking like you're paying attention to me. Maybe your mind is actually on lunch, but you're at least looking interested, right? When you start looking at your watch and looking away, I get the disagreeing, right? So I looked away and the red went up here, and then I get the red light. Okay, so I get a little feedback that might help me to know how to be a better conversation partner.
Does it actually help?
We are in the middle of a big study right now with a whole lot of things related to this, so I can't say yet. Yeah, but that's the question, right? Does it actually help? And there, I like to design things with the equivalent of the sugar pill. So we like to put in another technology, right? Because anybody thinks some cool new technology helps, right? So we put in a placebo technology and so forth. So it's actually kind of a lot of work to do these studies.
Are there some rules you're not allowed to lie to people when you?
She's got like a plain vanilla technology and her new technology.
Yeah, so we have lots of ways of doing it without lying to people. Yeah, we try to avoid that, although we do that when we have to. Oh, wait a minute. Actually, so here, I have this video, I think, queued up. Did it go or not? No? Okay. So I'll show you just an example of this in action. Actually, here he's got a camera on his baseball hat. The other kid got a camera looking at himself.
Hello, how are you?
Blocking eye contact. Now making eye contact.
Me shooting you, shooting me.
I'd love to have a sympathetic response right there. What's up?
How are you?
Good. How are you?
Good.
I like this thing.
You like it?
I like this thing.
That's awesome.
Every space bar and we'll go back. I made a perfect video.
I don't know, but for some strange reason, I think it would have been better with heat sensors.
You know what they're using heat sensors on fleeces now for is for lie detection. tell if your blood flow is different, if you're telling the truth or not.
Don't even think about it now. Oh, that.
You can get the face with it and the tape and analyze that later. That way you feel
Nice.
So he might not even need to be just the visual part, but the voice with it.
Sync it with the voice.
Just to use this until later would be great.
One thing I did notice is that the wires, it would probably be easier if it was more of like a self-contained system.
Oh, here the boy is showing a facial expression he learned to his mother. Okay. All right, so we're continuing that work with the Groden Center. We also have been approached by lots of companies who want to understand what their customers are feeling. And we are very interested in doing this in cases where the customers are willing and desirous of showing their feelings. Let's say company has a new product that you want to give your opinion on, and filling out like 1 to 10, all these things, doesn't necessarily communicate your true feelings. So how can we help you communicate your true feelings in a much easier and more accurate way? Young-Gil has been extremely involved in this work, really the lead architect of all of this thinking. This is not the actual subjects here. It's sort of some kooky acting, I think, but it'll give you a taste of what the idea is here, and then I'm going to launch into a couple more things that he's been working on here. Let's see.
About the product. Facesense is a software application which detects head and face gestures and can be used to gain valuable insight into customer experience. Here we see a person sampling a new perfume. Notice after testing the sample, Facesense detects a head-back event and a slight lip pull action. Also, the mental state graph changes from concentrating to disagreeing just after sampling. The tester didn't like that smell. The same tester tries a different perfume. Notice the strong lip pull action and the mental state graph for agreeing increasing after trying the sample. I think that's a winning smell. Detecting subtle reactions can be difficult, even for a trained person. Notice here that Facesense detects the subtle head shake, and the mental state graph has an abrupt change after the tester tries the sample. Here we see the tester trying the same sample again. Notice the reaction is less subtle, and we get the same pattern of head shake and mental state drop. It seems clear that he doesn't like the drink, but he reports that he likes it.
Great, thank you, Mr. Santiago. How'd you like that drink?
Oh, it was good. I liked it. I liked it a lot.
Sometimes self-report differs from actual experience. Facesense provides a method for investigating such discrepancies. With the Facesense technology, not only can you use it in real time, but you can analyze pre-recorded video. This allows you to perform many market tests from any location and process it with Facesense afterwards. The Facesense technology allows you a better way of understanding how your customers feel about your products.
If you were listening carefully, whoops, I'm still running the face thing behind. It's reading my face and telling you that, which I didn't intend to do. So I need to shut that off so it doesn't drive me nuts. That's funny. During the middle of it, when I was disagreeing there, here, let's exit the virtual machine. All right. Ooh. Okay. So with this capability, right, we can now do a bunch of other interesting scientific investigations, right? So we can look more carefully at how on earth it is that people read faces. How do they label them? What do they see? What happens in real face-to-face interaction versus in all this acted stuff? We know that in chess, you have 20 opening moves, right? And you've got minutes usually to move, and your opponent has 20, and that's 400. And when you expand this space, it's quickly an astronomical space, and that's dwarfed by the game of Go. And I don't know if we have any complexity people here, but the numbers for these things, there's no computer, projected growth in our lifetime that's going to solve these things exhaustively. I see some nods. Contrast that with the face. The face has 10,000 opening moves, all right? Your face could respond with 10,000 opening moves. This changes in tens of milliseconds, not minutes. So instead of 20 and 20 in minutes, we have 10,000 and 10,000 in milliseconds. You start to expand this out and, you can't even go a few lines into it, right? It's absolutely astronomical. So when people on the autism spectrum say that reading faces is like ocean waves, each one different than the one before, the space is enormously complex. We think there's a really underappreciated, extraordinarily hard computer science problem here of how the heck do we do this. And we'd like to, bring these tools to this with a bit more rigor, to understand this. That's what we're finding.
All faces look the same, which I know he feels because he's confusing people with each other.
Actually, there's a lot of prosopagnosia among people on the spectrum too. Yeah.
Videos to actual people and asking them to rate what they think the people are feeling and experiencing. I'm curious as to how well Facesense is reading people.
Yeah, we've done a lot of tests of accuracy, and we've done like the standard computer vision ones, training and testing on different data, having external people rate them. The upshot of it all is when you set it up in the computer vision way, training and testing on different data, you get 80 to 90% accuracy. When you do it on really hard data from people who were completely different cultures, different lighting conditions, no overlap with the test set, different acting conditions, everything, it drops down to around mid 60%. However, when you have human beings label the same data, they do worse than the computer. So where's the loss there? So we're still investigating, and a lot of other researchers are too, just how unique are these mappings, right? Is there really a one-to-one mapping between these patterns of expressions and these labels, and calling a lot of that into question. Mm-hmm.
Is it any worse than the computer? You're comparing this to self-reported emotions, or?
Self-report is fraught with problems. So we were comparing what the computer labeled it with what a panel of 18 people labeled it with. Okay. So external observer accuracy. Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But I mean, it's definitely true that when I'm in a different culture, I often can't. I mean, I rely a lot on my ability to read faces, and I find it extremely disoriented when I'm in a different culture where the facial expressions
means something
are
different. Yeah, totally. Right on. Zip ahead and talk about some other things. So back. Sorry, actually, I just want to mention. So, a lot in autism and complexity. A lot also in what are these rules of social interaction? And we've been doing stuff with Bank of America and all here too. There are a lot of companies out there that tell their customer service people to smile all the time. If you come in our store and the person waiting on you smiles, you'll have a better experience as a customer. You'll buy more and so forth. This is in the marketing and business school literature on customer service and so forth. And we said, when we've had software agents smile at people, like little paperclip shaped ones, and they smile at you, there's a time to smile that people like it, like when it greets you. But when you are having a bad experience, okay, which we all have, with any software, okay, no matter who makes it. I'm having it sometimes with this beautiful new designed MacBook too. And when you have these bad experiences and something comes out and starts smiling at you, that is a recipe for bad customer experience, right? I don't care how smart the thing is, right? It may be 100% accurate knowing I'm writing a letter, but if it's smiling at me when I'm having a bad experience, the Germans have a word for that, Schadenfreude, right? Joy at somebody else's misery, right? And the miserable one doesn't like that, okay? So we have to understand what these rules are, right? And they're complicated. So, and people on the autism spectrum, I think, actually could be incredibly intelligent and important partners in helping us do this, because they're very systematic and good at spotting the things that those of us who aren't officially on the spectrum take for granted. We don't like we just open our eyes and do this stuff and it works, right? And you just know to do it. How do we know to do it? I don't know how we know to do it. It's very hard to program a computer to do it when you don't know how you do it. So we have to figure out how people do this. And people on the spectrum are quite good at figuring this stuff out, I think.
But you alluded to that again. So is autism characterized by people actually feeling like having more information, not less information, too much? Because you seem to describe this as there's a million faces they see and...
Yeah, so autism is a very, it's a I think it's actually a word used to describe a lot of different conditions. So I have to be careful. Somebody with this on the autism spectrum label may or may not fit one of these particular things. In fact, the way to get the diagnosis is to check off in out of P boxes, not to check off exactly this set of boxes. And it's in out of P boxes in 3 different categories. So it depends which ones you've checked off. And you may have checked off a different set than this other person, so you have very different experiences. But you both get the label of autism. So there's...
But for any of them is what Christian is saying.
You just said it twice.
An overload of information.
Now, you said
A lot of people have told us that they're overloaded by the information coming in, the perceptual and sensory information coming in.
Couldn't that just be that people who are not very far on the spectrum, because I do believe it's a continuum, that we just have ways of filing it when we see it. So it just goes into a bin, and it, and it's not, and then we don't have to deal with that one simultaneously with the next one. So
Right.
we may just be processing them.
Mm-hmm,
We may be seeing all of them and unconsciously processing them, whereas if you don't know how to process them, they're all there.
Yeah, or it may also be that we're dropping more bits, and ignoring more stuff. They're actually doing more work, and in fact, there's some brain scanning studies that show some data that's consistent with that way of thinking too. So, who knows? And it also may be different for different groups, right? Some people may be in one category and
So
some...
if they're
some
trying
other.
to process it every millisecond or nanosecond or whatever, I don't know, and I'm trying to process it, to sample it at
every other second or something.
100,000 times or something that
Right.
they're sampling,
Right.
then of course
Yep.
they would feel confused.
Yeah. In fact, many people on the spectrum would have trouble with fluorescent lights. They see every flicker. They see every frame of the movie. They perceive motion differently. They incredible different sensitivity characteristics with sound. Extraordinarily high percentage of perfect pitch.
You're saying they see 60 hertz?
Some do. Yeah.
What did you ask? They see 60 hertz. They see 60 pitch.
Yeah. 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 Very interesting. A lot of possible differences in saccades and so forth. Okay, so let me keep moving. I'm trying to give you a sample of a bunch of different things we're doing, and I welcome coming back for more too. Right, so I'm shifting to talk about an area that Hyung-gil and I have been exploring, and he's the real expert here, so I've invited him to chime in if I mess it up. And so one of the things we've been interested in for a long time is the way emotion influences cognition. We know, for example, that on a day when the weather's like this, and those of you from Seattle probably don't even notice the weather on a day like today, but some of us feel kind of sad on a day like today. Oh, what happened? And if you phone people in Chicago in those first days of spring when the sun's coming out and it's beautiful and all, people, they like their computer more, they like their car more, they like their spouse more, they like the president more, everything gets higher ratings, right? If you call in spring in Chicago, the weather's going to be crappy a couple days later, so you can call them back a couple days later, and the ratings all go down, all right? Similarly, you get people coming out of a movie theater, happy movie, ratings high, out of a sad movie, ratings low. We know that emotion influences cognition. We know that it influences lots of things. So one thing that's quite interesting now is decision making, negotiation, business decisions, valuation, economic decisions. How does it influence that? So for example, Jen Lerner showed, when it's sad, you're feeling sad in the rain or whatever, that's maybe not such a good time to negotiate. You're willing to accept a lower price. You're willing to pay a higher price. The classic endowment effect is completely inverted in that case. The sell high, buy low. It's completely inverted in sad. You get the repeat of the effect in neutral. In disgust, you get a neutralizing of this effect. Is that right, Hyung-gil? Okay, I'm nodding so I remember this correctly. So there are these interesting ways, and how this happens is still a bit mysterious. The neuroscientists are looking at scanning patterns and all this kind of stuff. So there are a lot of things. Now, one thing Hyung-gil and I have been looking at is arousal and risk. We know that uncertainty increases arousal. We've seen it in his experiments, and it's been shown in lots of different things. So how does this affect? And then if that's positive or negative, if you're really uncertain and it's positive, there's more hope maybe, but you don't know, uncertainty about the future, uncertainty and negative, maybe more fear, so we're in the space. So we're doing a ton of experiments here, and I think you probably want...
So people like positive uncertainty, because my understanding, my very limited kind of pop psychology understanding was that people often would prefer a certain less positive outcome than an uncertain outcome that was potentially positive. but also potentially negative.
You were so good at anticipating the next slide. So let's go to an example and ask you guys what you prefer, okay? So suppose I give you two options. The first, and you have to pick one of the two. So everybody think about which one you're going to pick here. Option one is with probability 1, I give you $3,000. Option 2 is with probability 0.8, I give you $4,000. All right? How many of you are going to pick option 1? All right.
Most people will.
Okay, and how many people are going to pick option 2? Oh, wow, you guys are really well paid. Yeah, MIT is pretty much, I'm going for the $3,000.
You had done this for us that you'd already put a couple of extra zeros on it.
Yeah. Okay. So, we're finding it's easier to recruit MIT students to do the experiments for a very small amount of money too than people in the Boston area.
We would just all decide that we're going to pool our winnings, and then we go for option 2.
Very smart, yes. And clearly that's the smarter thing to do, right? Because obviously the expected value is higher here, 3,200. Now let's ask you sort of the same question, but it's actually quite a different question now. All right, so suppose now, and here's just, I put in greater than, less than signs, right? All right, so what we see here is, while you guys are unusual, most people would go for this, and they would be aversive to risk if there's a likely gain, all right? I want the gain, just take it, right? Low risk. Lower gain, but low risk. All right, so now let's go to the domain of losses, all right? This is all about losing money. Probability 1, I'm taking 3,000 away from you. Probability 0.8, I'm taking 4,000 away from you. All right, now how many of you go for option 1? You guys, because you're going to pool your results. Okay. How many of you go for option 2? Okay.
A few of us are normal. It's not.
How many of you would change your answer if this was real and not like just this sort of showing how smart you are? Okay.
No, 0.8 is too high. Okay, I think if you had made it, 0.8 for me is almost sure anyhow. I'd rather cut my losses and think about something else.
Okay. So you're pointing out something important, which is that people will have different thresholds. Like I was talking with Eric Horvitz, who you know very well, I'm sure, and he was in a brain study that had like a $50 gain or something, and he was kind of chuckling with me about how he was sure his brain wasn't behaving quite right for the $50 gain compared to the student's brain, right? Early guy at Microsoft. And so I thought, we all have different points where our sensitivity, just isn't going to behave the same as somebody else's, right? You can have a sensitivity function. So in fact, there are these different mappings of functions these are like objective values, right? But what really matters to your decision is your subjective valuation. Mm-hmm. So what affects your subjective valuation? Well, your experience and your current bank account and your current pay, all of these affect your subjective valuation. So all those, though, how do they affect your subjective valuation, right? Does your brain every millisecond process every single one of those experiences? Or does it have some efficient way of summarizing that influences your subjective value function?
It's not so crazy that you would worry about the right-hand side just because of Gambler's Ruin. We might be... we might have evolved watching some form of Gambler's Ruin play out with other members of our species or something. I don't know. But
right.
why would you be risk averse? Well, before before you get to actually get the expected value, you could die or whatever. And so maybe there is some evolutionary advantage. I'm just trying to think. I think you would have evolved.
Could be some reasons. Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, no, go.
Yeah. Okay. We can continue. So
for the first.
So what Hyunko and I've been looking at is these attitudes, right? So we just did an experiment where in the space of gains, and maybe you have to trust me on this since you guys are so unusual, most people would prefer the non-risky choice. They'd just take the $3,000 red. Okay. However, when it comes to losses, and I'm going to promise to take 3,000 from you, they prefer the riskier option. Okay, 0.8, you'll take 4,000 because I have a chance you won't take it. Okay.
Maybe they didn't calculate the expectations.
Right. Exactly. Yeah. I don't think they do in general, but even some people who do, what the difference is we think is that just feels good or bad. Like all of your life experiences and everything kind of goes in. And we think the way that you do the quick decision, and there's some neuroscience to support this in terms of shorter pathways and more projections and so forth in the brain, is that the emotions are integrally involved in this process. So whether we treat it just as a summary function or call it emotion or a bunch of biochemical mechanisms or whatever, there's a shortcut set of paths that is helping us to make quick decisions, summarizing a lot of complex experiences and expectations back in time as well as anticipating forward.
We're just optimizing a different function.
Exactly, we're optimizing a different function. Right, so what is that function? What is that subjective function? And so we know that we don't just work with these objective values, okay, where this x-axis is the objective numerical outcome, right, of these two distributions of possible outcomes. This could be red could be the left arm of a one-armed bandit giving you outcomes with this high variance distribution. Blue could be the right arm of the bandit, two-armed bandit, sorry, giving you lower variance outcomes of this distribution. This one has a slightly higher mean, so on average we should choose the blue one, right? Now, what we're going to do, though, is put this through some subjective value function. Now, this comes from Kahneman and Tversky, Nobel Prize, all that good stuff. They've parameterized this thing and proposed this. We're doing a lot of other things with it, though, and Hyungil's come up with a lot of interesting analysis here, and I don't have time to do all of them here. I'm just going to give you a teaser of a couple. So one is take the classic things like discriminability, right, that we can measure between two distributions, right, separation normalized by this sum squared of variances. Now, it turns out after you run this through the subjective value function, you've warped the shape of this, and now the d prime actually has changed. And the subjective d prime is actually larger. What this suggests is that by going through the subjective value function, you have better discriminability, which puts you in a better situation if you have to make a quick decision, right? You need fewer measures to make the right decision when you've got better separation of your data. This is clearly an advantage. It's advantageous to go through this function. Now, there's more to it than this. So we saw that the reference point, decision framing, right, if it was framed as a loss or a gain, gains most people feel good about, losses most people feel bad about. In fact, when we were doing this posture study and Hyungil had presented, we were trying to get people to sit up proud after success on a task, and the computer was sitting up proud, and we were wondering if the embodied cognition and that feeling when they were consistent would lead to better performance on these creative tasks. And the tasks then involved all these losses, which were making us feel terrible. Oh man, I know I only lost 2,000 instead of 3,000, but I'm losing, right? So it's this loss frame. So in this loss frame, you feel different than when it's in a gain frame. And the people over at Harvard and Kennedy School will tell you, if we talk about lives lost versus lives saved, people make the decisions differently. You feel differently at the time of decision making. So what this amounts to, and Hyungil has done a lot of simulations, and now we're doing the human studies, and very, very exciting stuff is coming in. But with just the machine simulation, so this is our discriminability, right? So higher would be better, lower would be worse. What we're seeing here is this thing called the reference point moving. This is affecting whether we're in the gain frame or the loss frame. So let me talk you through this here. So here's the one with the higher mean at a value of 5. Here's the red one with a mean of -5. Usually reference point is kind of the average of what you're getting. If you're pulling these two arms, you're getting some average value that's usually kind of somewhere in the middle here. But suppose the reference point is something like a -10, okay? So it's back here. So all of these look like gains compared to this. Well, gain, we know people are sort of risk averse. Take that 3,000, right? It's sure bet. So they're going to just go for the blue, and that has the higher means. That's pretty good anyhow. Well, this is what we see here. D prime is high here. Okay, that's good behavior. Down here, though, when the reference point is high, so the reference point is, say, over here, 10, then most of what you're getting here is losses relative to that. Okay, so if your reference is higher, you're used to getting 10, suddenly everything's coming in a little lower. Then you want the higher variance, this red thing. But in fact, choosing that higher variance is also choosing a higher loss here. Okay, so now we're seeing this with this analysis and with this model. All right, we can go through, and Hyungil has very nicely, systematically tested all the cases.
Do you see this in the stock market? I mean, have you tried to take any of this and look? can you find data which would allow you to see whether people's buying and selling behavior in the stock market relative to their history of gains and losses is like this? I mean, I would find that very interesting.
Actually, that's, show a lot of the stock market data.
There's a called disposition effect in stock market. So that's what how mood influences people's risk attitude.
Mm-hmm.
So, for instance, hopeful feeling makes people tend to be more risk-seeking.
Yeah.
Fearful mood makes people more risk-aversive. So that kind of this kind of theory can be explained this position.
But also, there's been this shift, right, from being hopeful
in this economy
4 or 5 years ago to being, very scared now.
Yeah, and
because
huge
of what
risk
people
aversion.
have experienced. So anyway, it would just be cool to take some of this and look at people's selling behavior, because obviously people's reference point has changed.
Exactly. Yes.
Right?
Yep. Mm-hmm.
There's sort of a different axis, and I wonder whether you have looked at the correlation, which is, if I put two kinds of food on your plate, okay, and I tell you have to eat both. Do you eat the one?
And your hand is wet.
No. Do you eat the one you like first, or do you eat the one you hate first?
It's the I've got good news and bad news, which do you want first kind of experience, right? It's also like, what's for dessert? Which taste do I want lingering?
So
how long do I have to?
whether, because there are definitely people who do one and the other.
Yeah.
And I wonder whether there is a correlation to this choosing the get over with the bad stuff sort of.
So it would be interesting if you have a particular behavior that we could say is consistent over time, and then we bias your mood to a positive frame or negative frame or disgust frame or sad frame. It's not just negative. Negative moods can have different negative moods can have different consequences. Okay, they're interesting different effects they have. So we could tease out some of those of interest and see if we could bias your decision making based on that frame. It'd be interesting. I don't need to go through all of these. Just tell you they're similar, right? If you're down here and if your reference is down here, so everything looks like a gain to you. Although of course these have infinite tails, but most things look like a gain. But if you're risk averse in the domain of likely gains, just give me that 3K. I'm not going to go for the riskier 4K. Then you're going to, on average, do worse, right? And so we're seeing this here. This is worse discriminability. And then you move to this other domain and it's better. All right, so this is holding across lots of different cases. And even in this case where they're equal variance, we see this heightened discriminability right in here when the reference is the average. Okay, when your reference point is right there in the middle. Now, Hyung-gil is getting really nice findings now of this and with real human behavior as opposed to just running machine learning algorithms. And actually we've hypothesized that not only, so here's this parameterization of the subjective value function, right, with this A exponent, this B exponent, and this lambda that are affecting the shapes of these curves. And so we've hypothesized these things, which are very important, right, related to fear and hope and these. And so now we're in the process of running a large experiment, inducing these states and looking at actual behavior, both short-term in the lab as well as some interesting long-term follow-up.
How do
See
you
how
induce
these
those states?
We have several conditions like fear, anger, and financially fearful state. So people watched some video clips like.
I wish I could show you the fear video we have. Yeah, it's on my other machine of discretion. Yeah. You have the memory stick of the fear-inducing condition with you? Play this.
Yes.
We could induce in the audience and see how it affects your questions. All right.
Anything to get us to shut up.
No, I actually love the interaction.
It's a little excessive.
So these are actually I'm near the end. I made half as many slides hoping it would be this way. So this so basically we're hypothesizing that the emotions put you into states that then become kind of these quick to consult states that your brain and your decision-making apparatus can use to do, a pretty good thing, especially when you don't have a lot of time to be more careful and reasoned about maybe doing a better thing, right? So this is it's kind of a quick and dirty mechanism. It kind of fits with Joe Ledoux's, work on the emotion brain with, showing the very fast fear pathways and the importance of jumping out of the way if you see a stick, because it could be a snake, right? And that protects you. And then moments later you can say, oh, wait a minute, that was just a stick. Okay, so you have more time to bring in the rational tools. But it's still interesting to look not just at immediate emotion, but moods and longer-term feelings and how those affect things that aren't quite as quick as jumping out of the way of a snake. And that's what Engel's been getting at in this work. All right, so I'm at the end here. I'll just summarize. I've kind of given you a quick tour of just a few of our projects. There's actually a lot more. And I've mentioned, reading of faces, social interaction key in autism, some health behaviors. I've just mentioned how the autonomic nervous system measurement has characteristic patterns in sleep and epilepsy and autism related to social interaction. Of course, it has a lot of other uses in advertising, marketing, consumer experience, usability, game, arousal, stuff like that too. It turns out it's an interesting measure to look at relative to risk and anxiety and uncertainty in decision making. It's interesting in the classroom and learning and much more. So I hope this has been a teaser to get you interested in learning more about our work. Everything's published that is public. It's online on our web pages. If you're interested in something and can't find it, again, you guys are actually on our sponsor list, which will come at the end here, and I'll do that. First, I'm going to give one ad. If you know people on the autism spectrum or others who have auditory sensitivities or problems looking at eyes who are local and interested in helping us develop this technology, we've got games and studies going on here that are fun and harmless. And we are looking both for people to help us, improve the designs, as well as participants who want to learn about themselves and see if they can have less difficulty in either of these areas. So we welcome and invite participants there. You can mail Rob Morris, you can mail Micah Rye here, you can mail me, and we'll help them find out more about that. And here's my thanks to donors and sponsors. And now, a fear-inducing video. Let's see what happens here. And by the way, thank you guys for your sponsorship here, Microsoft. Really grateful. All right, let's see what we have with this. Why this display thing's not going away? No name. Yango, what's the name of the? EF? Okay.
The current economic climate is the worst we've seen since the Great Depression. Banks are suffering. People are having a difficult time paying their mortgages. We are seeing credit card defaults like we've never seen before in the history of the industry. And overall conditions are really tough for a lot of people out there. Mortgage default rates are at all-time highs as people continue to have a difficult time paying off their mortgage. Credit card charge-offs and default rates are also higher than we've ever seen them before. Home equity loans are underwater across the board, and the entire consumer credit sector is really tightening up dramatically. The U.S. dollar is plunging, and we remain dependent upon foreign capital like never before. The U.S. government is in greater debt than any World War II. And state and local governments
We're not lying to them.
under the pressure of increasing budget deficits and the need to raise taxes, which is causing increased pressure on consumers as well. Unemployment is at a very high level. As it approaches 10%, people are struggling being able to spend on necessities. Consumer spending represents 70% of the economy, and that has been depressed for almost 2 years now. And forecasts are for this holiday season to see spending muted at levels consistent with last year.
You asked me whether I'm willing to invest in the stock market.
It's funny how you're laughing at that. We find when we tell people, if you ever do a study, manipulating feelings, never tell people that your goal is, if you're trying to frustrate people, never tell them your goal is to frustrate them. Because then when everything goes wrong, they just laugh. Okay, and similarly, when we tell you the goal is to elicit fear, when it starts doing it, you just laugh, right? We get a very different response when we don't tell people that, and they're sitting there and they're thinking, oh my
the
gosh.
laugh is kind of the acknowledgement, oh my God, I'm
Yeah,
happy.
right. It's like a
the
coping mechanism of, okay, I
yes.
know that this is happening, and now I'm gonna, it's almost like I'm gonna try to make myself feel better. Yeah.
What did you say?
It's kind of like Adam's jokes.
It's Adam's jokes. When you know that one of Adam's jokes is coming, you protect yourself. He's coming to dinner with us. You'll learn.
Oh, good. This sounds fun. Actually, this brings me to another point. A lot of people think smiles mean happy, right? And what we will see people, they're driving in the simulator, and they're running off the road and hitting the truck and everything is going wrong, and they'll turn around and they'll say 7 + 3 = 11, and they'll turn around and smile at you like I'm, like they want to socially redeem themselves. Yeah, and the thing is too, the emotion theorists will tell you there are two kinds of smiles. There's the true, genuine, happy smile, and there's the, say cheese smile. And one goes to the pyramidal, one goes to the non-pyramidal tract. And they involve different muscles, the orbicularis oculi. If you see these muscles, little smile wrinkle muscles, that's the true smile. If you just see the zygomat, this smile, that's the not true smile. However, what we see in these cases where people screw up and they're clearly not happy is the true smile, okay? So, reconcile that, right, with the theory. And as you look into it, it suggests there's something more complex going on here, right? And we are quite capable of trying to elicit a real true feeling, almost as a compensatory mechanism. So one needs to, be very careful not to overly simplify what's going on here with facial expressions and true feelings. There are a lot of dynamics. If you're just looking at the statics, you've got to recognize you're undersampling, right? There's much more to it than that. So look at it in this trajectory. They're miserable, they're screwing up, they're really not happy, and then they come out with this great big, it's like Adam's jokes kind of smile. I got to cheer myself up. It's not just, this horrible, bleak, gloom and doom stuff. So that's clearly something that people delight in.
A question about your being in a particular state influences your choices, right? And it seems like if you're in one of those states, like seeking risk or fearing risk, that you're more emotionally aroused than if you're neutral. So if you're neutral, you're more apt to make a good decision. But it also seems like you need to be aroused and cognizant to make really good decisions. So they almost seem opposite effects.
Yeah. So there's the often referenced and rarely replicated inverted U curve, the Yerkes-Dodson inverted U curve, right? So what you see in this inverted U curve, besides an inverted U, is different labels for the axes. So the horizontal axis will be something like arousal, okay? Not enough, too much. This will be something like performance or learning or memory or attention or whatever. Driving performance, how much time you stay on the road or whatever. And so the peak of the U is in the sweet spot, right? Not under-aroused, not over-aroused, but just right. All right, so so what you're saying, like under-aroused, I'm falling asleep, man, I just need to go to bed. I'm not going to be functioning very well. Over-aroused, completely incapable of doing anything useful, right? So get in that sweet spot. Now what's intriguing about this, though, is that as demands change, right? So this is maybe the person, driving down the highway at 40, 50 miles an hour. Okay, now you put them on the Autobahn in a really cool sports car and say, as fast as you've ever wanted in your whole life, and I promise you it'll be safe. Okay, boom, the whole curve moves, right? And if you're not aware of the fact that the whole curve moved, your data just doesn't look like an inverted U at all. It just, like, what the heck is going on? So, again, there are these unobserved variables that, that involve a lot of motivation, emotion, arousal. And we're, in order to understand human behavior, I've been saying for years, we need to start observing some of these behaviors, observing some of these hidden variables, and starting to, bring the tools of engineering and measurement to that, right? Not the tools of psychology of check off on this questionnaire how you feel, although we do that too. But, that's just fraught with a lot of subjective functions that those awareness checkboxes go through. We need to figure out what those functions look like. So we're going back to the things we can measure more objectively and seeing then how those relate to behavior and also to what people say they feel.
Couldn't you wait as a response to it? She's saying, sometimes they say, wait until tomorrow to make a definite decision, a definite choice. So you can gather information in the in the aroused
it's less
state,
emotional if
but
it's not.
you can then make your
Yeah.
decision. I mean, I think that's what they're really telling you to do, to gather the information when you're gathering information well, and then to wait and make the decision at if you can separate the two of them, you
Right.
can like separately optimize.
Right,
them
right.
or
Then you can
something.
probably make better decisions.
And you can
Yeah.
probably make better
This
decisions.
game was like an instantaneous one. We had to choose which one we wanted on our gut.
Yes, yes,
So we were sort of
exactly.
like,
Your $3,000, $3,200 game was an instantaneous
Right,
game.
right. Yeah, and Hyungil's, so tell the instructions you give. It's very important, actually.
We have several domains to test. The 3,000 thing is a one-shot decision making. So this is the people are given all the information. So one option gives you $3,000 with for sure, and the other 4,000 with 80%, like all information, and then they make one-shot choice.
That's what Kahneman and Tversky's theory is based on. But
That's prospect theory is based on that domain. The domain I'm focusing on is more like learning situation. People are not given any information, like the bandit arm.
you don't know which arm has which distribution, actually, when you play his game. You just have to learn it by pulling the arms. Okay? So
Based on their previous trials, they are accumulating the knowledge about underlying.
this is more realistic for stock market and real world decisions, right? Because you've had a bad experience with one, so you start to migrate away from that. But then you had this one big hit with it, so you're drawn back to it. You go from exploiting the good
Right,
one to exploring.
right.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
people actually, so that's interesting. When you now sort of calculate, so I actually have to experiment to guess the average of the two.
Exactly,
exploring.
exactly,
So, wait,
right.
wait. So and one of them is more risky and one is less risky. You could ask me, while you do that, give me an estimate about the average gain the arms give.
Yes.
And would I get the estimate according to the actual statistical estimate, or would I get it according to your corrected curve, which is...
That's actually part of what I'm doing right now.
So what's the answer?
We've run 70 people so far.
Every trial, people had 25 trials for each task, and every trial, people received some money or paid some money, so loss claiming or gain claiming. And then they choose one of the two options, and they are given some random outcome from our outcome distribution. And then they self-reported how pleased or displeased the obtained outcome are. And then
Which gives you an idea of the reference point, right? In fact, it's sort of, when we have the Kahneman and Tversky's prospect theory subjective value function, we're reading off basically the vertical axis directly, right? That they like the value. It's a positive value as a negative value.
Yeah, this self-report is called experience utility. So I can infer the utility curve, utility function from their self-reported data, and I actually can see the PT-like, prospect theory-like curve. And then I also ask their prediction about their next outcome of each option. So this self-report is about their
Estimate of
prediction,
distribution,
predicted
right.
utility. And I can also infer their predicted utility function from the other self-reported data, right? And we can see some difference between their experience utility function and their predicted utility function. And my assumption is that their mood state we manipulate first. They are in the condition like fearful condition, angry condition, and economical fearful condition after watching the scary movies or the movies you've seen. And my assumption is that their current mood state influence their predicted utility function like that. So in the angry state, they show more risk-seeking attitude, so somewhat upward curve there, risk-seeking pattern. But in the fearful condition or economically fearful condition, they might have somewhat risk-aversive attitude. So
It also goes with the attack withdrawal, and anger and fear. There's some basic consistent characteristics there we see across human behavior in the physical realm. And so we're, testing the cognitive concomitants of that.
Yeah, traditional prospect theory by Kahneman and Tversky is about one-shot prediction game with full information. So they assume they found fixed hit the curve. But in this kind of learning situation, I assume that somewhat changing prediction function under the influence of a mood state or their confidence. If they had sequential gains from their previous trials, they are in a high confidence state, so they might have somewhat lower risk seeking attitude, right? So that confidence will change the curve.
It's got hysteresis.
Hysteresis, yes, it is. It's out of equilibrium. And then it's an out of equilibrium situation where you're going back along the curve out of equilibrium, and that's what happens in a physical system where you're going into the wrong phase, basically.
Yeah, because basically as you're sort of averaging your experience, to predict if you're doing well or not, you're moving this reference point, right? So you're shifting.
I was not just talking about the reference point, right? I really was wondering whether you
would actually compute your distributions differently.
Right, because I mean, you could actually ask me, okay, predict what is the average gain you have.
Right, right.
And whether I actually would calculate that average gain.
We could ask you. A lot of the participants we recruit, we couldn't, but we could definitely ask you. Yeah, with most of them, it's just pick an arm, pick an arm and keep moving fast because we're trying to get the emotion-based thing.
Experimental results saying that if you have sort of the two arms banded and each one is going after the different probability, people will average. They seem to choose the arms proportional to the probability of payoff for each arms instead of actually maximizing the benefit.
Yeah, probability matching.
Yeah, so they match the probability
rather than the expected.
So they're actually, it seems, I don't know how close these are actually, but it seems that people are actually computing the distributions themselves. If you ask them.
Yes.
Yeah, that's truly basic. And that's also called probability matching in the animal science. Because people are not given any information, they should explore the distribution first, right? So it's exploration and exploitation trade-off in reinforcement learning. So they've done some trials to explore the underlying domain.
And to learn the distributions?
Yeah, in this kind of 25 trials, their behavior appears like following the probability matching because they spent some initial trials to explore the domain.
So can you measure their impression of their payoff with each arm from the probability matching that they're doing?
I talked about their self-report data about their pleasure and displeasure, right? And I can see I can infer two different domains. One for their sample outcome domain, right? Sample outcome domain, we can see can you
go back to this? And it's after 5:30, so we have to
26 slide.
Yeah.
Previous. Oh yeah, next.
You wanted this one?
No, next.
Sorry, wait a minute. You want this
one? Yeah.
This one?
Yes.
Okay.
So in the objective outcome, we can see their sample outcome distribution is like this, right? But their self-reported experience utility
is like this.
We can see like this kind of distribution, right? Depending on the curve, they actually adopt. This is a person's own characteristic, right? Some person might have big loss aversion, but some person would have less loss aversion, where risk-seeking, yeah. So we can infer this kind of curve from each person's data. Yeah.
And see, so, if this exactly equals this, then yes, they were computing the exact distributions. But what we're finding with people's behavior is this does not equal this. There's some interesting changes here. And furthermore, we can begin to characterize these by putting them into different states. Yeah.
And also from their self-reported data, when I compute discriminability, I can actually see louder discriminability from their subjective value rather than the objective discriminability computed from the...
Yeah, this is really cool. I hope this holds up with the rest of the subjects. It's too early to say until we run the whole experiment. But right now we're seeing that enhanced discriminability, which is really, really cool, right? Because it's going back to saying that that doing this subjective change with, with emotion is one thing that changes, it may not be the other thing, but doing this actually has a value, right? It's improving your performance with fewer samples for learning. So when you're not given all the information but you have to learn it, this actually gives you better performance. So it's a pretty exciting thing we're finding, but stay tuned. We have to see if it bears out. So we should stop there, and then I'll hang around and take additional questions afterwards. Yeah.